Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Recently I forged a pretty cool Bowie knife using the inner ring on one of these large truck bearings. If you recall from that video, we saved all of the rollers around the outside for another project. So today, it's time to forge a super cool knife using a bunch of these roller bearings. Typically you'll see guys use a Canister Damascus technique where you're putting all of your bearings, whether tapered roller bearings or ball bearings, into a steel can, forge welding that all together, and then forging a blade out of that billet. I want to try something a little bit different here. This is a piece of mild steel, 3/4 by 2.5, and I need to work it down to about 7/8 by 1 inch approximately. The press is super handy for this, and then I pretended that I have a big power hammer, but I actually had to go back to the press and work it down some more, and then clean it up on the little giant 50-pounder. It's great for forging knife-sized cross-sections, but yeah, not so much for this size of stuff. Anyway, we got this forged down, and like I said, it's a piece of mild steel. What I want to try is something that's reminiscent of the old traditional Sanmai technique, in which you would often use, some sort of low carbon steel, or more specifically or more commonly wrought iron back in the day, and then you would forge weld your blade steel into that. This is a new center punch technique that I'm working on. And now we can go ahead and start drilling some holes. So we've got these roller bearings and they are tapered. My plan is to try to press the tapered bearings into a hole and essentially, okay, that didn't work, that's too big. All right, I think I didn't account for the wobble on my drill press. It made the hole a little bit bigger than it was supposed to be. All right, so here we have a 1/2 inch drill bit, and these bearings are about 530 thousandths on the thick end. So there we go. Will this press in? We've got 25 or 24.5 tons of pressure here. I'm thinking this will work. Nothing to it. All right, so that mild steel is deforming easily, and we can press that hardened roller bearing into there. And so far, so good. All right, so we just need to repeat this process. You can see what I'm trying to do here, I think, and that is leave stock or material on either side of these bearings, and that's going to be the jacket, the core, not the core, the main portion of our blade steel, essentially. And we're going to use the tapered roller bearings as the edge steel. So it went together fairly decent. There's some very small gappage. I think the hole would need to be slightly smaller to get a completely tight fit on those tapered bearings, but I think it's close enough to forge weld. So spray some WD-40 on there to provide some carbon deposit and protection, and then of course flux it a little bit, and we'll go in for the first press here on the forging press. I made sure to forge this at a higher heat than I normally do. With this low carbon steel, you have to have a higher forging temperature than your high carbon steel, which is why I'm wearing the green shaded lens or glasses covers, because it actually gets to where the incandescent light begins to hurt your eyeballs a little bit. So safety third, that's what they say, right? So we've got some minor gaps showing on the edges of this new billet we have here. That's not too concerning though. I was able to grind them out, and we'll continue to work this billet down at a nice high heat here on the power hammer. And hopefully everything stays centered in there. Looks pretty good. I don't see anything coming apart. So we can go ahead and start forging a tang here. And I want to make just a simple little kitchen style blade, something like a Nakiri style, slicing up vegetables and things like that in the kitchen. So forge that tang out there, and then we can start forging the blade as well. This is all mild steel on the end here, so this tang is completely mild steel, or at least except for just a very small portion. I wasn't exactly sure where I started that tang, but all the bearings are up in the blade here, at least 95% of them. So we need to widen this out here, use the round dies on the press, and really squish that out here, straighten things up a little bit. I still can't really tell if everything's in the middle and centered up, but it should be, hopefully. Need to forge the spine down here as I continue to forge out the bevel and give it some distal taper here. So getting close here, forging the bevel in a little more, tweaking the tang. Everything seems to be going pretty well. I had more material on the tang than I needed, so go ahead and trim that off, and then we can move on. Make some final adjustments on the bevel and the tang here, get everything to dimension here, and then we can straighten the blade. It's just a matter of hammering out the bends essentially. Got a bunch of flux in the bottom of my forge, which is kind of annoying there. Trying to brush that off and get the steel cleaned up before we are finished with the forging process. Just using a little bit of welder's soapstone there to highlight the edge, and that really helps being able to see it and show where you need to make adjustments. So you can see that's not straight yet. Pretty big warp to it, but I noticed there's some issues on the spine here. I got some voids that's not going to work, so we need to grind those out. And this actually ended up changing the profile of the blade a little more than I was hoping, and so kind of went from a sort of Nikiri style to more of a Santoku style or something. But anyway, we'll just adjust the tang a little bit, and actually isn't too bad like this. And I was able to get rid of those voids on the spine. Alright, so now we can go ahead and normalize this blade, get everything back to a even and normalized state on here. After that, I went ahead and did a process anneal on it. Quenching the blade, nothing broke apart or cracked, so that's a good sign. Pretty happy that the welds appeared to hold together just fine. I was slightly nervous about that, combining the mild with the high carbon steel. It's not as easy to get a really good weld with that. But in any event, we've got this tempered up, and we can go ahead and grind this blade. I did not do a rough grind. I went ahead and left it forged dimensions, which were pretty close. And now we need to go ahead and etch this and see what we have. The high carbon steel, the roller bearings, tapered roller bearings are the dark steel, and the mild steel, low carbon, is the white or silver colored. And you'll notice that there's a lot of bleed over. That's carbon migration. So we don't have a real defined border, and that's what happens as you heat steel up. That low carbon steel, portions of that became a medium carbon steel. So at this point I've noticed that we have sections of the edge that are just mild steel. And something else that I noticed as I was building this is that this blade is easy to bend because, again, it doesn't have high carbon steel all the way through. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and test it, and ooh, look what we have here. Well, we've got a nice chip out of the edge there. This is ground and sharpened to a cross section that's appropriate for a vegetable and kitchen cutting knife, not chopping a 2x4. But beyond that, we also have deformation along the edge and also where it is mild steel. For the most part, the edge held up pretty good for that very thin cross section. So let's go ahead and see what kind of destructive test we can do on this. And as I expected, this did bend pretty much right where there was a mild steel only joint in between two of the roller bearings. But it was pretty stiff. Again, I think that had something to do with the carbon migration into the mild steel, and actually created like a medium carbon steel over greater portions of this blade. But in the end, it really didn't perform super well on this toughness test either, and snapped off on the second bend. Alright guys, well I think what we have here is a great way not to make a knife, but sometimes you try ideas that don't always work, throw things at the wall, see what sticks, And it's just, you know, sometimes you just figure out what might work and what doesn't. Sometimes you learn concepts from failed projects that can be applied elsewhere successfully. So there's some value to this kind of thing. And yeah, it was interesting. So appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you on the next video.